tuning in from across the globe through Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Zoom. Before we get started, some housekeeping items. If you're joining us through Zoom today, I ask that you please stay on mute throughout the event. If you have a question for us, there will be a question and answer portion at the end of the program. Please hold your questions until that time, and you can submit those through the chat feature. One note on the question and answer. I know that there are people tuning in on several platforms. The only way to guarantee that we will receive your question is to submit that through the chat feature, and we'll get to as many questions as we can during that segment. With that, we're going to jump in. Religious freedom is something that many of us take for granted here in the United States, but there are places in the world where people risk their lives every day to follow Jesus Christ. Nigeria is one of those places where brutal attacks take place on an almost daily basis. As I mentioned, we have a number of distinguished speakers with us today to discuss the ongoing violence against Christians in Nigeria. One group that's been on the forefront of this conversation is the International Committee on Nigeria. Stephen Inada, ICON's co-founder, is going to start us off today. Stephen.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I bring greetings from the International Committee on Nigeria, ICON, an international organization for peace building and social justice, PSG, and our friends and allies in Africa, Europe, Asia, the South Pacific, South America, and our rich network in North America, especially in the US. We all agree on human dignity, rule of law, and pursuit of happiness, which is absent in Nigeria. Civilians in Nigeria face a daunting threat to their security and basic human rights, including targeted killings based on ethno-religious identity, crime, kidnappings, abductions, arbitrary arrest, detention, torture, and inhuman incarceration, denial of fair and open trials, restriction on free speech, freedom of assembly, and censorship and restriction on a free press, government corruption, restriction on external investigation, and lack of due process and fair judicial system. This actually has been displayed in the last 3 years when Zaki, a Shia leader, was imprisoned without trial, and up to now, he's still being held in detention. We have how Nigerian military plowed through protesting peaceful youth in Igboland, southeastern part of Nigeria. And we just have recently Dr. Obadiah Melafia, who has been harassed because he spoke to the evil happening in Nigeria. According to Global Terrorism Index 2020 report, Nigeria is the second most terrorized country in the world after Afghanistan. This designation was made possible by Boko Haram and Fulani terrorist groups. The two latter groups have caused civilian deaths than ISIS combined in Iraq and Syria. Over 60,000 deaths in the last 10 years. Over 3 million displaced people in Nigeria with women and children during the month. Over 35,000 girls were trafficked across the Mediterranean to Europe in the last 3 years. Boko Haram has used child soldiers and has married off abducted teenage girls, including the Chibok girls and Leah Sharibu. They are still in captivity. As a result of Boko Haram and Fulani militant attacks in Nigeria, there is food crisis, forcing the Nigerian government to borrow 5,000 metric tons of grain from the Economic Community of West Africa, which should not happen because Nigeria can be the food basket of Africa. The Nigerian government is not in control. There is need for the international response to help end terrorism in Nigeria and the Lake Chad region. ISIS is regrouping and making the defeat of ISIS in Iraq and Syria a child's play. Today, here with me is NFS star and other Benjamin Watson, referred Congressman Frank Wolf, and Deacon John Stonestreet. And also, I would say we have somebody like I will describe as Margaret Thatcher of the United States, in person of the Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. We would like to let global community understand that Nigeria is a strategic partner to the US and the whole world, and must not allow her potential to be wasted. I yield to our guests to speak to these issues. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Representative Tulsi Gabbard, who was elected to Hawaii State Legislature in 2002 when she was just 21 years old. 2 years later, she volunteered to deploy with her fellow soldiers, becoming the first state official to voluntarily step down from public office to serve in a war zone. Now in her fourth term in Congress, Representative Gabbard is a champion of religious freedom and has been recognized throughout both secular and religious communities for her tireless efforts. She believes that freedom of religion is an essential right for all, and we couldn't agree more. Representative Gabbard, thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much. Thank you to ICON for your great work, and I'm honored to be here with this esteemed panel to focus and bring awareness around the plight of those in Nigeria who are being slaughtered. Just 5 days ago, we observed the solemn 19th anniversary of Al-Qaeda's attack on our country on September 11th. 19 years later, after that attack, Islamist extremists like Al-Qaeda and ISIS are continuing to carry out terrorist attacks around the world. They're continuing to slaughter and enslave Christians and other religious minorities around the world. Too often these attacks go unnoticed. These attacks are continuing in Nigeria by Boko Haram, an Islamist extremist terrorist group formerly affiliated with Al-Qaeda that now pledges allegiance to ISIS. It is estimated that around 60,000 Christians have been targeted and killed in Nigeria over the last 2 decades. Things like truckloads of Boko Haram terrorists arriving at a Christian village and going in and slaughtering every person there, man, woman, and child. According to the Global Terrorism Index, the killing in this region is greater than that committed by ISIS in Iraq and Syria combined. This is why I'm here today, to join my friends in bringing attention to this crisis, to raise the voices, our voices, and call on others to join us in opposition to the systematic slaughter, kidnapping, and torture of Christians by Boko Haram and other Islamist terrorist organizations in Nigeria and in the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Gabbard. Our next speaker is an NFL star and well-known leader in the Christian community. Benjamin Watson commanded the NFL for 15 years as a tight end and helped guide the New England Patriots to a Super Bowl win in 2004. He retired at the end of the 2018 season, but hasn't slowed down. He's a leader in the Christian community and is well known for his dedicated work, serving as a voice for the voiceless. He's here today because he is passionate about bringing awareness to the genocide that is taking place in Nigeria. Benjamin, thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you to all those who are watching and have attended. Thank you to ICON for your tireless work, and to the congressman and congresswoman here as well. I'm here for many of the same reasons that everyone else is. I can remember several years ago it being impressed upon me that the body of Christ here in the United States is dealing with our own issues, but compared to what's going on around the world in many respects, we need to be people that stand up for those who are being persecuted. At some time, it may be us. And heaven forbid that when that time comes for us here in the United States, we didn't stand up when we had a chance to stand for those around the world. We would want them to do the same thing for us. I first was really made aware of what was happening in northeastern Nigeria, back in 2014 when 276 female, largely Christian students were kidnapped by Boko Haram in northeastern Nigeria. And we can remember the hashtag of Bring Back Our Girls flooding our timelines, and we remember even the First Lady of the United States and celebrities tweeting about this and putting it on social media. Well, now today, 6 years later, more than 100 of those girls are still missing. And the hashtag and social media campaigns have ceased. But for the families and friends and communities their lives have not been forgotten. This moment captured our hearts, but it's just one in thousands of killings and kidnappings and razing of entire communities and burning of churches that has happened at a genocidal rate in Nigeria for the last 20 years. And it's not only Boko Haram. Most recently is Fulani herdsmen who have largely operated with impunity and have targeted and attacked Christian communities. And you've heard several facts already, so I won't repeat many of them. But just to get an idea, the killing, as we've mentioned before, in the region is greater than that committed by ISIS in Iraq and Syria combined. More than 60,000 Nigerians have been killed, and 2 to 3 million have been displaced. And that's something that is to consider because they are moved away from their homelands, and starvation, those sorts of things are happening as well. Children, many of us have children, are being forced to become sex slaves or even child soldiers. I'm someone like many of you and all the people on this panel that care about justice. And we are in a time of racial reckoning in our country. The term justice is thrown around a lot. But if we're sincerely concerned about justice, we must understand that justice must be advocated for at home, yes, but also abroad. And violations of justice and human rights are a threat to all of us. We see what happened in Rwanda, where we didn't speak early enough, and 800,000 people died. So what should we do? We're going to talk about what we want to do, but the call to action, at least from my understanding and from what I would like to ask and advocate for, is for the U.S. government to be involved, to send a special envoy to Nigeria and the Lake Chad region, to engage with victim communities and relevant government administrations in order to help coordinate an international response to this crisis, and also develop an effective strategy while working together to stop this genocide. We are mired right now in an election cycle, as we should be. We should be paying attention to that. But I believe that the United States can do more than one thing at one time. We already are. I believe this is one of the things that we should be focused on, even though we are mired in a presidential election. And I do call on the president to publicly mention this genocide as he's done in the past, and to follow that up with action. When he mentions these things, people listen. So we call on him to do that again. Secondly, the American faith community should stand by Nigerian Christians. I mentioned it before, but we are one unified body. We should support ministries on the ground. We should support organizations that are providing medical aid and humanitarian support to survivors, essential care to those that are displaced. We should help rebuild churches as we would love for them to do for us. Hebrews 13:3 reminds us to remember those that are in prison and ill-treated for the faith as if we are suffering with them. And lastly, a challenge to those of us who care about racial and social justice here in the United States. We are fighting for the equality of Black citizens here in the United States. We should also remember that while we fight for those who are descendants of the African diaspora, that we should also remember and advocate for justice and peace in the homeland. This time of reckoning, as important as it is for all of us here in the United States, shouldn't be limited to our shores as injustice persists. Every little bit helps. And so that's why I'm here, simply to raise a voice against human rights abuses that affect all of us. And also the media. You have a tremendous opportunity to tell these stories, to provide opportunities for the public in the United States and the American church to hear about what's going on outside. There are several publications that have brought this to our attention, but not enough. There needs to be more of a commitment to talk about these justice issues so that they become important to us over here. If we are silent about this from this point on, it makes us in some ways complicit. That's why I'm here, and I hope that we can make inroads to ending what's going on the continent in the country of Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Our next speaker today is former Representative Frank Wolf, who served over 30 years in the House of Representatives for Virginia's 10th Congressional District. He spent decades advocating for human rights and religious freedom in the United States and abroad. His unyielding support for religious freedom resulted in the passage of the Frank R. Wolf International Religious Freedom Act of 2015, which established the International Religious Freedom Office of the United States Department of State and the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom. Representative Wolf, thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you. Thank ICON and thank the other panelists and everybody here. I appreciate it very much. Nigeria is the largest country in Africa with over 200 million people. Genocide. Genocide is taking place in Nigeria, and Boko Haram has killed over 27,000 civilians. And it was said Boko Haram has actually killed more Christians than all the people that ISIS killed in Iraq and Syria combined. Greg Stanton of Genocide Watch has said Boko Haram, he said, is committing genocide against Christians and crimes against humanity, against children, especially girls. It kidnaps to become sex slaves. It forces boys to become child soldiers. It massacres police and others associated with the Nigerian government. It commits war crimes against ordinary civilians who go to markets and other public places, to which Boko Haram sends its suicide bombers, many of whom are children. Boko Haram has kidnapped. Boko Haram has now pledged its allegiance to ISIS. Greg Stamp went on to say Fulani militants in central Nigeria are also committing crimes against humanity and genocidal massacres against Christians. And now we have seen ISIS has moved into the region, and there have been reports that Al-Qaeda is there also. So we have genocide occurring. We see hunger. Millions of displaced persons living in squalid conditions. We see kidnapping rampant throughout the country for ransom. We see little or no education in many, many places. We see sexual trafficking. Over 15,000 young girls, women and girls alone have been taken to Italy. We see boats sinking in the Mediterranean with fleeing Nigerians, many of them drowning. We see massive government corruption. We see human rights abuses by the military. And yet with all this, we see very little action by governments in the West. The current policies and actions of the American embassy in Nigeria to address these issues are not working. So what should we do? What should America do? I believe we need a special envoy for Nigeria in the Lake Chad region. The problems of Nigeria have spilled over into the neighboring countries of the Lake Chad region. Boko Haram and Fulani militants and ISIS are now operating in these countries as well. The special envoy would work with all the American ambassadors, not only in Nigeria, but those in the surrounding nations as well. The special envoy can coordinate the U.S. response to the crisis by various agencies of our government and can work with the allies in France and England and other NATO countries, and can also work with the UN and other international agencies and NGOs. There is a powerful and a successful precedent for a special envoy. President George W. Bush, to his credit, in 2001 took bold action to appoint former Senator John Danforth to be the special envoy for Sudan. The foreign policy establishment there had failed. The appointment of the special envoy was made in the Rose Garden with Senator Danforth standing between President Bush on one side and Secretary of State Colin Powell on the other side. This sent a message to all our government agencies that Danforth was President Bush's man. It sent a message to all the international allies, the UN and other international agencies, that President Bush was committed. He was committed to solving the problems in Sudan. It also sent a message to the Sudanese people and the Sudanese government that this was President Bush's man. Danforth had the authority to speak for him. And it also sent a message to the world that America cared deeply with what was taking place. You may have heard and seen Bernard Henry Levy's Wall Street Journal, December 2019 article, where he said what's happening in Nigeria could lead to a Darfur or Rwanda. When the world and the U.S. ignored genocide in Rwanda, hundreds of thousands of people died, and history is repeating itself. You remember the time that President Clinton felt so bad for not acting that he flew to Rwanda at the end of his term to apologize to the Rwandan people. I believe the appointment of a special envoy for Nigeria and the Lake Chad region by President Trump is critical. It will help coordinate our U.S. policies, help work with other nations and international agencies. It will send a message to the Nigerian people and Nigerian government that things need to change. It will give hope to the people and the people in the surrounding countries who are also affected. And it will again show that the West cares. This is a defining moment. It is said, so goes Nigeria, so goes all of West Africa. I plead with the president to name a special envoy for Nigeria in the Lake Chad region to end the genocide and save thousands of lives.
Thank you, Representative Wolf. Our next speaker is joining us virtually. It is John Stonestreet. He's the president of the Colson Center for Christians Worldview and host of the popular podcast Breakpoint, the nationally syndicated commentary on the culture founded by late Chuck Colton. With a master's degree in Christian thought, he is a sought-after author and speaker on areas of faith and culture, and has co-authored 4 books, including A Practical Guide to Culture and Restoring All Things. Thank you for joining us today, John.
As much as I wish I could be there in person. I've been a fan of Benjamin Watson on the field, but an even bigger fan of his off the field, especially given his tireless advocacy for human rights and the human rights of the unborn. No one has done more to advocate for religious minorities, for religious freedom than Congressman Frank Wolf. He's had a career that transcends so many other efforts, and he's been at the center of them for so long. He was a hero to Chuck Colson, and he's a hero to me. And I just want to also express how honored and grateful I am to be able to sit on this panel with Representative Tulsi Gabbard. Particularly, just really grateful for her recent courageous outspokenness on Netflix and the debacle of this film Cuties. All that to say, we're here to talk about Nigeria, and the dangerous thing about following such an esteemed panel is that all has been said. And I think that all has been said in terms of what is happening, but we cannot be saying this enough, given the centrality of Nigeria to the African continent and therefore to the rest of the world, and the sheer scale of what's been happening there for so long. That is only, in many ways, getting worse and worse and worse. I'm here for a number of reasons. Number one is that we believe at the Colson Center, as did our founder Chuck Colson, that religious freedom is not just a good American idea. It's an inherent good to the world to recognize that every single person is made in the image and likeness of God, has inherent dignity in and of themselves from the moment of conception to the moment of natural death, and therefore are fundamentally allegiant and fundamentally responsible before any other groups of people and before any government, before anyone else's acceptance to God himself. And because that is the way the world is, that is the way human beings themselves have been created. Religious freedom is not just a good idea. Religious freedom is central to human flourishing. And not only do we need to protect religious freedom anywhere and everywhere, we absolutely need to stand up for those who not only are not experiencing the religious freedom that we have, but instead are experiencing religious persecution. Religious liberty is not only a human reality, it is a privilege to steward. So those of us that are enjoying the blessings of the sort of freedom that we have in the United States have a responsibility. As a person of faith, I care about this because these are my brothers and sisters in Christ in Nigeria. Even more than that, I am ordained as a deacon in the Convocation of Anglicans in North America, which is an Anglican diocese that's part of the Church of Nigeria. My bishop is a Nigerian, Felix Orji, and we operate within that church. And to know the sort of theological and worldview and faith clarity that the leadership of my church has, in many ways comes from the persecution that they actually are threatened by each and every day. The centrality of Nigeria to the African continent, to the future cannot be overstated. And so with so much being said, so many stories being told, and there are more stories to be told, let me just sum up two things that I think we need to walk away with here today. The first has to do with the scale of the evil that is happening in the country of Nigeria right now. Congressman Wolf very carefully and very intentionally repeated a word, and it is a word that is not thrown around lightly in the wake of World War II or in the wake of so many other things. It's the word genocide. This is a very carefully defined word from the International Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide. And it was carefully defined so that it wouldn't just be thrown around and applied to everything. When Congressman Wolf used the term genocide to describe what's happening in Nigeria and what has been happening in Nigeria, he was using the term absolutely correctly. The ones he was quoting using this term absolutely correctly. What we are seeing and have been seeing in Nigeria against people of faith, primarily Christians, at the hands of Boko Haram and the Fulani militants, qualifies under every single angle for this word genocide. The second thing that I think we need to take away from this today is that this issue in Nigeria is nothing new. It goes back to at least 2000. Stephen Inada has been doing incredible work with ICON and documenting this and bringing attention to this, telling stories that go back now at least a decade or more. But as old as this issue is in Nigeria, it's as recent as today. It's as recent as this weekend. I challenge everyone and encourage everyone to go to ICON's website, particularly their resource that they have online called silentslaughternigeria.com. There you will find a calendar that goes back just to right around Christmas time of 2019. It's not even a year old. And yet, day by day by day by day, you will see there how ICON has documented the people who have been killed, the people who have been abducted, and the people who have been injured as part of this genocidal effort. And I went on this calendar just today. I'm looking actually at it right now. And what I see is this thing has been going on for over a decade. And at the same time, it's as recent as this weekend. Just in the last week, we're talking about 20 Christians who were killed at the hands of Islamic militants in Nigeria and over 60 that were abducted just in the last 7 days. Now just take that out about a year, take that out even longer. In February 1943, a young girl named Sophie Scholl appearing before a traitor's court in Nazi Germany. She had led a student-resistant movement with her brother Hans Scholl. And she was being accused of treason and eventually would be convicted and executed actually in that same day. She made this statement: someone, after all, had to make a start. I'm grateful for the work of ICON because in a very real way, they've made a start. They have made a start to take this from an issue that many people don't think about, don't know about, and putting it front and center in all of our hearts and minds. What we have to do, and what Sophie Scholl hoped to have happen when she made a start with her work and basically resisting the Third Reich and leading that student-resistant movement is something that I know ICON wants us all to do, and that is make a start in our own lives. Benjamin has given some great things that we can do. I'll give us 3. Number 1 is we can pray. Many Christians think that, I'm going to pray, but I also want to do something. Make no mistake that praying is doing something. And in God's economy, prayer makes a difference. And praying aligns our hearts with the heart of God. Make no mistake, the heart of God is aligned with our brothers and sisters who are facing persecution, abduction, and death at the hands of Boko Haram and the Fulani herdsmen. And we need our hearts aligned with God's heart on that. If there were no other reason to pray, that would be enough. Secondly, we need to demand action, especially from the U.S. government. Congressman Wolf has outlined very specific ideas, including the idea of a special envoy. Benjamin Watson mentioned calling President Trump to say something. Both our president and vice president committed in 2016 in standing up for persecuted religious minorities, especially Christians. And we need to see that promise carry forth with action from the U.S. government. And then finally, third, we can all do something on our own social media feeds in our own conversations with our own churches to pray for the Christians of Nigeria and bring attention to it with others. I encourage you, go to ICON's website, go specifically to silentslaughternigeria.com. Share the stories, share the videos, share the calendar. The scale itself is stunning, and it will bring attention to our brothers and sisters there in Nigeria. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this. I'm quite honored.
Thank you, John. And I'm so glad that you brought attention to ICON's Silent Slaughter calendar. And go back and look at the numbers. We're almost at 3,000 dead just this year alone. So those numbers, they're astounding, and it's very hard to see, but people should definitely take a look at that. So thank you. Our next speaker is Piero Tozzi. He's the Republican Staff Director with the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission, and also holds the position of Senior Legal Counsel for Global Affairs with the Alliance Defense Fund. He previously served on the House Subcommittee on Africa, Global Health, Global Human Rights, and International Organizations, among other positions in the areas of religion and human rights. Thank you for joining us today, Piero.
I'm here just to convey regrets and regards from Congressman Chris Smith, who unfortunately is not able to be here. I work for Mr. Smith in his capacity as the co-chair of the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission, but I will say that the House of Representatives has been well represented here. Both Congressman Frank Wolf, who though retired, still is a legend and a leader and a great voice on international religious freedom. It's a reason that the 2016 International Religious Freedom Act was named after Frank Wolf, and also Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, who really is, I think, one of the true independent voices in Congress. And as was mentioned, whether it's speaking out about Netflix, she really does speak truthfully, regardless of party position, and she does have a great deal of admirers across the aisle and in the country as well for that outspokenness. Just briefly, I think on matters of policy, there have been a lot of deficiencies, I think, particularly from the State Department. Not so much false narratives, but incomplete narratives. We often hear the conflict of the middle belt of Nigeria defined in terms of farmer-herdsman conflict driven by climate change. And while that may be a factor, it is incomplete. There is an identity and an ideology here that drives much of the conflict, and it is an ethno-religious supremacism, particularly driven by the Fulani herdsmen. The other incomplete narrative, and I would caution, we've talked about Boko Haram, and by extension now the breakaway faction, the Islamic State West Africa, which is very much a threat. But there is a distinction here, and I think because of the activities of Boko Haram and ISWA, it's easy to put all jihadism terror into that Boko Haram basket and not to address the issue with the Fulani herdsmen. And that is a problem, because the difference is, while Boko Haram and ISWA are marginalized and rejected, the Fulani herdsmen do act with a degree of impunity. And that's why it is extremely important that Fulani leaders, most importantly President Buhari, but also the Sultan of Sokoto and institutions such as the Mieti Allah, the Cattlemen's Association, do speak to their kinsmen and co-religionists in unequivocal terms and condemn the violence. And it's also important not only that message is conveyed in English, but also in Hausa and Fulfulde. Because oftentimes you hear one thing that's spoken really to a Western audience or to an outside audience, and not internally. I think Frank Wolf and his call for a special envoy, it's very important. I will say within the State Department, credit does go particular to Bob Destro at the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights and Labor, who has sought to have a point person on Nigeria. But I think the point that Mr. Wolf makes is an important one, that person has to be elevated. He has to have the ear of the Secretary of State and of the President, so as to be a credible voice. I believe Mr. Smith will be leading a letter in that regard on that point. And I believe also he does wish, we had planned to have a hearing on Nigeria at the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission, which unfortunately, because of the COVID situation, was postponed. Between now and the election, we have a very short time, so I don't think it'll happen before then, but it is something I think that is very important, and Mr. Smith believes is important, so we do look forward to that. With that, I do thank you for that, and I look forward to hearing the rest of the conversation. It's a very important conversation that we're having here. Thank you.
Thank you, Piero. That concludes our agenda. I'm going to turn the floor over to Stephen Inada for some closing remarks, and then we'll move on to the Q&A portion of the program today.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Congressman Frank Wolf. Thank you, Benjamin. And thank you, Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. Thank you, Piero, and also thank you, John Stonestreet, and all our friends across the world joining us and discussing these important issues. So we are going to continue to mobilize around this common human violation happening in Nigeria. On this note, I would like to thank you, and also we are pursuing this agenda that Special Envoy is important, and that is the only thing I think can resolve this issue. It has worked in Sudan, it can work in Nigeria. So I think if we speak to this call that an envoy will have requisite authority of US government to minister with other allies in this region, will bring a lot of people to justice. This must stop. Thank you so much. God bless.
Thank you, Stephen. At this point, we're going to begin the question and answer portion of our program. Just to let you know, Representative Gabbard did have to leave us a little bit early today. She had to head back for votes, so she's not available to answer questions, but the rest of our panel still is here and available. If you have questions, you can submit those directly through the chat feature, and I'll see those and convey those to our guests. We do have one question to start us off. This, I think, Stephen, is for you. Last month, ICON released a report with data and detailed testimony of some of the victims of the violence that we've talked about today. We've heard that the report is being widely used within the inner circles here of the US government, and that policymakers are referring to the report and really finding that valuable. But what more do you think could be done with the silent slaughter data report here, abroad, or in Nigeria itself?
Yeah, this data report is targeted at just one thing, to educate people, inform them about atrocities happening in Nigeria. And then this actually will inform government policy when it comes to Nigeria, that human rights violations, killings, genocide is taking place in Nigeria. And this is data document that speaks to that. On that note, everybody will look at it that this must stop, and also government should form their policy decision based on this data and try to hold Nigerian government accountable.
Thank you. The next question, is there currently a bill in Congress focused on Nigeria? That's for everyone, but maybe.
No, I don't believe there is, and frankly, the Congress doesn't have the capacity to set up a special envoy there. The special envoy comes from the president. That's what, this is parallels with Sudan. President Bush saw what was taking place. He saw how certain elements in the foreign policy element weren't really doing very, very much. And so he did it. So this really is an executive action by the President of the United States and the Secretary of State.
Thank you. And you alluded to this, or perhaps already.
Piero has something to say.
Oh, okay. Piero, you wanted to weigh in on that as well?
Well, there were a couple of Nigeria-focused resolutions earlier in the Congress in advance of the elections, and then there was one commemorating the Chibok kidnapping. But I don't think there's been a substantive bill on that. I think there is a role for Congress in introducing a resolution or a bill on a special envoy. There currently is one which has passed the House on elevating the special envoy to combat anti-Semitism to an ambassador, for example. But let's see if we can. I think a congressional letter, would be probably what would be a first step, and then perhaps later that we can introduce some legislation calling for that. But Mr. Wolf is of course right that the president, in his authority, could do that. The State Department, I will note though, had been curtailing the use of special envoys other than those that were referenced in legislation. So I think there still is a role for Congress in that as well. But yes, there's a need, and there should be more that's done because of the critical importance of Nigeria.
Absolutely. And I think you're right about the letter being the first step. So we'll see if we can get any traction there.
Could I say,
Yes.
a letter from Congressman Chris Smith will carry a lot of weight, because Congressman Chris Smith is literally one of the very best members of Congress I ever served with. He is highly respected. So really, a letter from Congressman Smith. Nobody in Congress in the past 40 years has done more for human rights and religious freedom than Congressman Chris Smith on every issue. China, Nigeria, everywhere. The guy. So really, I agree with Piero. A letter from Congressman Chris Smith would be the gold standard, because he is absolutely the very best member of Congress serving on these issues.
So a follow-up question along those lines is, could we get a bill in Congress to declare genocide in Nigeria?
But you could, because there was legislation passed, and Piero was very much involved in it, to call what was taking place in Iraq genocide. As you recall, there were 1.5 million Christians in Iraq before the war broke out. They went down to 200 to 250,000. The Congress, to the credit, and Congressman Chris Smith was very much involved in that, passed a resolution declaring a genocide. And to the credit of Secretary of State Kerry, he called it genocide. But yes, the Congress did, and Congressman Chris Smith was instrumental in doing that.
Great. And a question from Facebook, who appoints the special envoy?
The President of the United States and the Secretary of State. And can you imagine the power if it were held in the White House with President Trump on one side and Secretary of State Pompeo on the other side, with a special envoy in the middle, the way that President Bush did? That would send a message to everybody: this person is going to solve this problem, and I stand behind him or her.
Okay, another question from here in the room says, the reason the special envoy worked so well in Sudan was because Senator Danforth did not believe any of the false narratives about the Sudan that the State Department did. How can we ensure that we get a special envoy for Nigeria that doesn't believe the false narrative about the farmers versus herders?
Well, I have confidence in President Trump, and I have confidence in Secretary Pompeo. They would appoint somebody that really is not going to fall for that narrative. I think they would appoint somebody like a John Danforth. So I have no doubt that they would appoint the right person.
And that's where this report comes in, that has the information that we're talking about, to show that there's not that narrative, and that, exactly what is happening on the ground.
And to your point, the report has firsthand testimonies.
Yeah.
It's the first of its kind, so it's an excellent resource on this. A question for you, Benjamin. How do we engage more people on this issue?
We engage more people by using your platform, whatever it is. Everybody has a sphere of influence. And so for some people that may be, a large following on social media. For other people, it's not as large, but we all have someone that we can contact. We have someone in our churches, someone at our jobs, people in our family. People are in place to get the word out. It's just a matter of what's important. Because we get the word out about things that are important. The NFL just started the season. How many people are talking about that? Why? Because it's important. It doesn't matter if you have a TV show or whether you are just a fan in middle America. You're talking about it. And so the way we get people involved is to talk about, to challenge people on what exactly is going on, to be educated on what's going on so that we can speak to it and we can bring up these issues and also see how they align with what's going on right now in our country. It's not the same, but there are parallels that we can draw and we can direct people to when there's a conversation about justice. Oh, by the way, let's talk about international justice. When there's a conversation about infringements upon religious freedom here in the United States. Oh, by the way, let's talk about religious freedom over here on this continent in this time with these other group of people. So there are many ways, but it starts with people understanding what's going on and the gravity of it, and then deciding that they are going to advocate and lean in.
This might be a question for you, Representative Wolf. Benjamin spoke earlier about the fact that the elections are coming up and there are a lot of issues that we're talking about right now and that this is just one of them. Do you think that this particular issue is something that concerns voters and that whether or not a special envoy is appointed or there's action that's taken is something that matters to voters in the upcoming elections?
Yes, I clearly think, one, this would be not a controversial issue. Republicans and Democrats would be very, very supportive of it. Secondly, there is a diaspora of Nigerian Americans of well over 400,000, and there's a diaspora of many others from the surrounding countries. So this would be very well received by Republicans, very well received by Democrats. This would be a very non-controversial decision to make. And so I think the American people would support it. So I think it would be a very positive, very well received. I don't think you would have anything criticizing by anybody in either political party. I think it'd be very, very well received and very well received by the American people.
Great. A question from the field that says, are there sanctions on individuals within Nigeria who are responsible for the violence, such as the governor of Kaduna State, or mention ways that sanctions can be applied?
Yes, they are putting sanctions on travel, but it's deeper than that. I mean, I think that's important. I mean, I would put sanctions on many more. But frankly, and I think he mentioned it, Benjamin mentioned it, the Chibok girls, everyone did hashtag bring back our girls. Over 100 haven't come back. We need more than sanctions. We need a person who can pull in all the assets of our government, the way that Danforth did. Somebody who can bring in the UN, somebody can bring in our friends in England, France, and Germany. Somebody can bring in the World Food Program, have David Beasley set up a special thing for feeding people. Somebody can bring in IJM to work on the issue of sexual trafficking. Somebody can, I mean, you need somebody that has a credibility, and in the government, when the right person, when the White House calls, things happen. And that's what happened. Danforth was President Bush's person. And so, yeah, travel restrictions for the Magnitsky Act, absolutely. Sanctions, I would also sanction foreign aid coming in, not to hurt the people, but against the, I mean, there's a lot of things. But you need somebody who can coordinate all those activities and work again with our friends in England, our friends in France, our friends in Germany, our friends in the NATO. So I think you need personnel as policy, and the right person with responsibility can do all those things.
Great. If there are any more questions, please feel free to submit those through the chat feature in the Zoom meeting. We're also taking questions through the comments on our Facebook or our Twitter.
Piero, please tell Congressman Chris Smith I give him my best, and that I think he's a Congress without a Chris Smith would be a dark place. Chris Smith has done more on the issue of human rights and religious freedom than anybody else in the history of the Congress. And tell him that I say God bless him.
So well of you too, Mr. Wolf. The two of you, if people don't know, came in together with Ronald Reagan in 1980, and I know he misses you. So, but he always he constantly brings your name up, and in a good way. So, you know, it's very much mutual admiration there.
Another question for Benjamin Watson. Why does this issue hit home for you?
Why does this issue hit home for me? I mentioned that verse in Hebrews chapter 13 that talks about remembering those who are in prison and those who are ill-treated as if you were, basically. And so scripture talks a lot about the persecuted. And it's not that the persecuted church is something else over there. It is analogous to our own body being in pain. I played football for 16 years. I've had several injuries, orthopedic, head injuries, all those sorts of things. When part of my body hurt, the rest of the body hurt. And I rehabbed that body part and I protected that body part. The same way in the body of Christ, when part of our body is dealing with something like this, all the rest of us should hurt. And all the rest of us should do anything that is within our power to use our voice, our actions, our prayers, most importantly, to advocate for them, because we are one and the same. And so that's the main reason why it's so important, because we in the United States, we live in a wonderful country. And we're afforded a lot of freedoms that we have to continually fight for, including religious freedom. But it may not always be the case. There may be a time when one of my 7 children or their children are dealing with an issue just like in this book. And I will want the people in Nigeria to remember them. I will want Christians over there to remember those kids in America that are being slaughtered for their faith simply because they are Christians. I will want them to come to their aid. And so those are the reasons why it's important. And then, you know, it's a justice issue. My wife and I, we try to lean into so many justice issues, whether it is trafficking, whether it is racial justice, sanctity of life, you know, abortion, those sorts of things. I see them all on one spectrum. And so while at times we may focus on one or the other, I see the interconnection of justice. And scripture talks a lot about God being a God of loving kindness, righteousness, and justice, for he delights in those things, Jeremiah chapter 9, 23 and 24.
I have 2 more questions coming in. This one I think, Stephen, would be for you. If this crisis is as bad as everyone here says it is, and we know that it is, why don't we, the public, hear more about it?
Yeah, this is the question of the media, because if you go to Nigeria, even some part of Nigeria are not aware of what is happening in the north central region. So, and the reason is because one, government has really worked so hard to make sure journalists don't cover these problems. And now when that happens, you now begin to look at which information are they sharing with the international community that will elevate or that will speak to these issues that people will just like, this is happening in Nigeria. And that is the reason why we are speaking to these issues. We are advocating for the vulnerable. And then we are also, a lot of people used to, in the State Department, we used to be confronted with the issue, there are no reports on that. And then we have reports on that. So also, we are going to be pleading with journalists, international media, to take interest and listen. And through that, I think a lot of people will hear about this atrocity. But I tell you, engaging media from financial standpoint, the vulnerable Nigerians don't have that. But we want people like what people we have here today as they're speaking, more people will hear about that. But it it is also a question of, is the international media interested?
Right, right. Which is a good lead into our next question about how,
Piero.
oh, I'm sorry, Piero wants to weigh in.
You know, you do have a Nigerian diaspora here in the United States. You know, we saw with the Ethiopian diaspora several years ago real engagement there on a resolution that called for the end of human rights abuses and freeing of political prisoners. And there was a very good grassroots effort that entailed reaching out to congressional representatives. You had a number of communities where you had large concentrations there. That is something I think that the Nigerian diaspora community needs to do more, and that's engage your congressmen, congresswomen on this issue, and your senators. That is not something that we have seen to such a great extent. There are other groups, the Armenians also utilize that very well. So there's more that I think can be done, and it's very important that the diaspora groups do engage and are involved and raise this issue.
Thank you. I have two more questions at the moment, and then I think we're gonna start to wrap things up. One more, and I think these both might be for you, Stephen. A big help to the Sudan Special Envoy was the American Anti-Slavery Campaign because of the hundreds of thousands of Black South Sudanese being taken into slavery. Would ICON be interested in working together with the anti-slavery group that is tracking the trafficking slavery jihad in Nigeria and 4 other countries in Africa? They're eager to help.
The answer is capital yes. Because you begin to see how these terrorist activities drive each other. You have bad neighborhoods. So I'm glad and happy to be part of that. And then we'll be able to connect with other international organizations. Like I mentioned, International Organization for Peace Building and Social Justice is actually big in Europe. And then also in Africa, they will be able to work and coordinate that because we work together on this. So it's a yes.
That's great. So then along those lines, how can individuals and other groups here in the US and abroad help support ICON's work, the work that you're doing and the work that you might begin to do going forward so that we can achieve some of the things that we've talked about today?
Yeah, we have our website, iconhelp.org. Then you can look the drop button and then you see different areas. You can also go to silenceslaughternnigeria.com where you can track incidents of atrocity daily in Nigeria. And then you can email us, you can give your support, much more, you can amplify our voice on this. And if you want to connect with victims, we can connect you with victims. And that is very important. Then they will be able to, like, oh, people are actually caring for us. Such words of encouragement mean so much to them. So on this note, you can go to our website, iconhelp.org, and then you can see different aspects, area you would like to contribute. Thank you.
Great. I think that concludes our program for today. Thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you, Benjamin Watson, Representative Frank Wolf, John Stonestreet, Piero Tozzi, Representative Tulsi Gabbard. Everyone did such a wonderful job today. We appreciate your time and attention to this important issue. Working together, hopefully we can make a difference and see some change in the future. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. Have a great day.